For decades, thousands of crimes remained frozen in time, unsolved, unanswered, and unforgotten. But in 2024, forensic science shattered the silence. Tiny traces of DNA, once ignored or invisible, finally spoke louder than years of mystery. Tonight, you'll witness 50 shocking breakthroughs that prove one thing. No matter how much time passes, science never forgets. Cold cases are the ghosts of our justice system, haunting families, investigators, and entire communities. Yet with the rise of advanced sequencing, forensic genealogy, and touch DNA analysis, 2024 became the year those ghosts were finally laid to rest. From cigarette butts to coffee cups, from fingernails to forgotten letters, here are 50 cold cases cracked by the relentless power of DNA. 1. The sealed cigarette, 1982-2024. In 1982, a brutal street murder shook a small town. Detectives scoured the scene but found nothing useful, only fragments. Among them was a half-smoked cigarette tossed onto the pavement. It was sealed inside an evidence box and left to gather dust for decades. In 2024, thanks to next-generation DNA sequencing, saliva on the filter pointed directly to a familiar face in the community, a man who thought he had escaped justice for 42 years. 2. The clue beneath the fingernails, 1991-2024. A young woman was attacked while walking home from work on a summer night in 1991. Police collected scrapings from beneath her fingernails, but the technology of the time was too primitive to decode such tiny traces. 33 years later, with ultra-sensitive DNA profiling, a complete genetic profile was rebuilt. At last, the victim's family received the answer they had waited half a lifetime for: the identity of the killer. 3. The coffee cup in the trash, 1978-2024. A store employee vanished after her shift ended, leaving behind a scene filled with scattered, useless fragments. Among the evidence preserved was a paper coffee cup discarded in a trash can beside the shop. In 2024, comparing DNA on the cup's rim with samples from the crime scene revealed a perfect match. The killer had crossed paths with police many times before, but only when that cup was thrown away did the truth finally surface. 4. The bloodied farm window, 1985-2024. On a winter night in 1985, glass shattered at a rural farmhouse. What investigators found inside was haunting: a gruesome murder. A minuscule blood stain on a shard of glass was too tiny for analysis at the time, and the case faded into silence. But in 2024, advanced DNA restoration reconstructed a genetic profile from the fragment. After nearly 40 years of silence, the killer's identity emerged. 5. The hair on the tape, 1990-2024. The victim had been bound with cheap duct tape. The killer believed he had erased all traces, but caught in the adhesive was a single, almost invisible hair. Over 30 years later, scientists used mitochondrial DNA technology to analyze it. In 2024, the long fight for justice ended, thanks to a clue the murderer never imagined could betray him. 6. Secrets in the wedding ring, 1981-2024. A woman was murdered, yet her wedding ring remained on her hand. Years later, when investigators had run out of leads, scientists examined the inside surface of the ring. There, they discovered trace DNA, sweat left behind. In 2024, that genetic code revealed the hand that had gripped the ring one final time. 7. Darkness in the Alley, 1983-2024. A young man was attacked in a deserted alley in 1983. His jacket, marked with a faint stain, was preserved but could not be tested. In 2024, that stain became the key. DNA profiling identified someone no one suspected: a church volunteer who had once joined the search party for the victim. 8. Mystery at the truck stop, 1975-2024. In 1975, a chilling murder at a highway truck stop haunted a community for nearly half a century. A small scrap of fabric from the victim's clothing was preserved in storage. Using genetic genealogy in 2024, investigators built an entire family tree from that cloth. The branches eventually pointed to a man who had long since died, finally freeing the truth for those still alive. 9. The lone strand of hair, 1986-2024. In 1986, detectives found a single strand of hair in the victim's coat pocket. At the time, it was useless. But in 2024, technology capable of building a profile from one hair follicle traced it to a local family. By following the genealogical branches, police narrowed the search to one suspect, the man who had remained invisible for decades. 10. The dust-covered evidence box, 1972-2024. In 1972, a horrific murder terrified a community, only to fade into silence. A crime kit was sealed and stored in an evidence room, untouched for 52 years. In 2024, when it was finally reopened, the DNA inside was still strong enough to create a full profile. At last, after more than half a century, the haunting mystery was solved. 11. The broken button, 1984-2024. In 1984, a young woman was found murdered near a railway line. Investigators discovered a single button torn from the killer's shirt clenched in her hand. The fabric was too degraded for testing at the time, and the case went cold. In 2024, advanced DNA extraction revealed sweat and skin cells embedded in the fibers. The button finally spoke and named the man who once wore it. 12. The letter that never sent, 1977-2024. A man was killed in his apartment in 1977. On the desk, police found an unsent letter, sealed in an envelope. For decades, it sat forgotten. In 2024, forensic teams analyzed the flap of the envelope and discovered DNA from saliva that wasn't the victim's. It led directly to the killer, someone who had written the victim's final correspondence. 13. The fingertip on the door, 1980-2024. In 1980, a shopkeeper was murdered during a robbery. On the back door, investigators noticed a faint smudge, preserved on the wood, but impossible to process then. In 2024, touch DNA technology extracted a profile from the dried skin cells. The match identified a man who had lived in the same neighborhood for years, unsuspected all along. 14. The tooth in the dirt, 1976-2024. After a brutal assault in 1976, police scoured the ground and found something strange. A tooth fragment embedded in the soil near the victim. No one knew what to do with it then. In 2024, mitochondrial DNA analysis reconstructed the genetic line of the tooth's owner. The investigation led to a long-forgotten suspect, and the missing piece of the puzzle fell into place. 15. The bloody shoelace, 1989-2024. A young boy was killed in 1989, and his shoelaces had been cut. A faint smear of blood was preserved on one lace, but it was far too small for 20th century labs. 35 years later, next-generation DNA sequencing turned that drop into a full profile. In 2024, the shoelace became the string that tied the killer to the crime. 16. The cold beer bottle, 1992-2024. After a barroom murder in 1992, police collected scattered bottles left on the table. One beer bottle, still smeared with condensation, was bagged as evidence. For decades, it yielded nothing. In 2024, enhanced DNA recovery revealed a profile from the rim. The killer had toasted his drink at the scene, never knowing that years later, that bottle would betray him. 17. The Whisper in the Pillow, 1979, 2024. In 1979, a woman was strangled in her bedroom. Detectives collected her pillow, where faint stains suggested a struggle. The DNA was undetectable with old technology. In 2024, scientists used high-resolution sequencing to isolate a mixture of genetic material. It revealed the intruder, a family friend who had once offered condolences to the grieving relatives. 18. The Ticket Stub, 1988-2024. A college student vanished in 1988, and her body was found weeks later. Among her belongings was a bus ticket stub. At the time, it seemed irrelevant. In 2024, analysts examined the stub carefully and discovered sweat traces along its edge. DNA identified the man who had boarded the same bus and who had taken her life. 19. The Raincoat Stain, 1982-2024. During a stormy night in 1982, a man was attacked walking home in his raincoat. Police preserved the coat, which bore an indistinct smear on the sleeve. 42 years later, new forensic techniques extracted a full DNA profile from the old fibers. The stain that once looked like nothing revealed the hidden hand of the murderer. 20. The Plastic Straw, 1993-2024. A teenager disappeared from a local diner in 1993. In the trash, investigators found a plastic straw believed to have been used by her attacker. At the time, it held no value. But in 2024, scientists recovered saliva from deep within the straw's ridges. That trace of DNA finally identified the man responsible, decades after the night at the diner. 21. The Chewing Gum Wrapper, 1987-2024. In 1987, a young woman was attacked on her way home. Nearby, police recovered a crumpled chewing gum wrapper. For decades, it sat useless in an evidence bag. In 2024, advanced DNA testing extracted saliva traces from the foil. That tiny remnant of gum led straight to the man who had stalked her. 22. The Umbrella Handle, 1974-2024. A brutal street stabbing in 1974 left investigators baffled. The only odd item found was a broken umbrella abandoned at the scene. 40 years later, forensic experts examined the handle and pulled DNA from old skin cells. In 2024, the profile unmasked the killer who had once walked away in the rain. 23. The Cracked Watch Band, 1990-2024. A victim in 1990 was discovered with a damaged wristwatch, its band torn as if during a struggle. The watch was preserved, but never tested. In 2024, modern DNA extraction pulled microscopic blood from the cracks in the leather. That blood belonged not to the victim, but to the attacker. 24. The Fast Food Bag, 1983-2024. A clerk was murdered behind a gas station in 1983. Police collected a greasy fast food bag discarded nearby. At the time, it seemed irrelevant. In 2024, scientists swabbed the inside of the bag and found DNA traces of saliva from fries once eaten. The profile matched a man long suspected, but never charged, until now. 25. The Rusty Knife Sheath, 1971-2024. After a fatal stabbing in 1971, police recovered a knife sheath, but not the weapon itself. The sheath was stored away for half a century. In 2024, experts tested the interior fabric and extracted skin cell DNA. The sheath, forgotten and rusted, became the silent witness that named the killer. 26. The Baby Blanket, 1994-2024. In 1994, an infant was kidnapped and murdered. A blanket left behind contained faint fibers and stains, but no useful evidence at the time. In 2024, genetic genealogy from the blanket led investigators to an extended family tree. The branches narrowed to one suspect, the man who had taken the child. 27. The parking meter coin, 1986, 2024. After a street assault in 1986, police gathered loose change scattered near the scene. One coin bore faint traces of dried blood. For decades, it was overlooked. In 2024, scientists swabbed the coin and obtained a DNA profile. That single quarter, once meaningless, identified the attacker. 28. The matchbox, 1978, 2024. In 1978, a young man was killed outside a bar. Investigators found a matchbox lying nearby, but considered it unimportant. Decades later, in 2024, DNA analysis of the box revealed skin cells and sweat. The genetic evidence pointed directly to a suspect who had lived undisturbed for years. 29. The leather glove, 1981, 2024. A leather glove was found at the scene of a 1981 murder. No one could link it to anyone at the time. In 2024, high-resolution DNA recovery pulled genetic material from inside the glove. The profile fit perfectly with a man who had been questioned but never charged decades earlier. 30. The cigarette pack, 1988, 2024. A victim was discovered behind a nightclub in 1988. Police collected a crumpled cigarette pack near the body. For 36 years, it sat untouched. In 2024, new forensic techniques extracted saliva DNA from the pack's torn edge. It finally exposed the killer who thought his last smoke had vanished into the night. 31. The handkerchief, 1973, 2024. In 1973, a woman was strangled in her apartment. A handkerchief was found near her body, but no usable evidence could be drawn from it. In 2024, scientists revisited the cloth and extracted touch DNA from its fibers. The profile identified the neighbor who had once offered to help carry her groceries. 32. The soda can, 1995, 2024. A college student was found murdered after a party in 1995. Police collected empty cans from the scene, but none seemed significant. Nearly 3 decades later, in 2024, a soda can revealed saliva DNA on its rim. That single drink finally revealed the predator who had stalked her. 33. The bus seat fiber, 1982, 2024. In 1982, a teenager was abducted on her way home. Investigators recovered a small fiber from a bus seat she was last seen on. At the time, it held no answers. In 2024, forensic genealogy traced DNA embedded in the fiber to an extended family tree. It led to a suspect who had long lived in plain sight. 34. The kitchen towel, 1970, 2024. A housewife was killed in her own kitchen in 1970. A stained towel was collected but never tested. More than 50 years later, DNA sequencing in 2024 revealed skin cell traces belonging not to the victim, but to her killer, her husband's best friend. 35. The plastic comb, 1989, 2024. In 1989, after a violent assault, police found a cheap plastic comb in a nearby alley. No one claimed it, and it sat in evidence for decades. In 2024, new methods detected both sweat and dandruff DNA on its teeth. The comb finally combed through the lies and identified the killer. 36. The library book, 1981, 2024. A university professor was killed in 1981. Among his belongings was a borrowed library book, strangely out of place at the scene. Decades later, in 2024, Forensic teams swabbed the book's cover and uncovered DNA from someone other than the victim. It matched the killer who once turned pages of the same book. 37. The shoe print swab, 1976-2024. A man was beaten to death in 1976, leaving behind a bloody shoe print on the floor. Investigators took a swab, but the technology of the time was useless. In 2024, advanced sequencing reconstructed a full DNA profile from that faded trace. The print revealed whose footsteps had haunted the crime scene all along. 38. The beer cap, 1990-2024. During a summer festival in 1990, a young woman was murdered. Police gathered discarded beer caps, but none were tested. In 2024, DNA testing recovered saliva from one cap. The genetic match exposed the killer, a man who had danced among the crowd that same night. 39. The rope fibers, 1972-2024. A farmer was killed in 1972, his body found bound with rope. Investigators kept strands of the rope, but could do little else. In 2024, DNA from skin cells caught in the fibers pointed directly to the attacker, finally tying up a case left hanging for 52 years. 40. The broken glass bottle, 1985-2024. In 1985, a brawl outside a nightclub ended in murder. At the scene, a shattered bottle lay stained with blood. Testing was impossible then. In 2024, improved DNA analysis separated the victim's blood from the attacker's. The bottle's edge exposed the hand that had wielded it. 41. The paper bag, 1977-2024. In 1977, a store clerk was murdered during a robbery. Investigators collected a brown paper bag left on the counter. At the time, it offered no leads. In 2024, DNA was extracted from skin cells pressed into the bag's surface. The paper finally revealed the thief who turned killer. 42. The dirty sock, 1980-2024. A young man was attacked in 1980. Near the scene, police found a single dirty sock. For decades, it was seen as meaningless. In 2024, forensic teams pulled DNA from sweat embedded in the fabric. The sock pointed to the man who had once walked away free. 43. The broken necklace, 1991-2024. A woman murdered in 1991 had her necklace torn during the struggle. The clasp was saved as evidence but never tested. 33 years later, DNA from skin cells clinging to the metal revealed the attacker, someone who had once pretended to mourn her death. 44. The candy wrapper, 1988-2024. In 1988, a teenager was found dead in a field. A candy wrapper lay nearby, dismissed as trash. In 2024, saliva DNA recovered from the wrapper revealed the predator who had lured her there. Justice finally unwrapped the truth. 45. The car seat belt, 1975 and 2024. A taxi driver was killed in 1975. His car was impounded, but nothing useful was found. In 2024, DNA specialists swabbed the seatbelt buckle and discovered genetic traces from the passenger who attacked him. After 49 years, the seatbelt locked in the truth. 46. The pen cap, 1983-2024. A journalist was murdered in 1983. Among his scattered belongings was a pen with its cap chewed. For decades, it meant nothing. In 2024, saliva DNA from the cap identified the man who silenced him. 47. The wool scarf, 1972-2024. A nurse was strangled in 1972 with her own wool scarf. Investigators stored it, but no technology could help then. In 2024, DNA was recovered from fibers deep inside the weave. The scarf exposed the man who had once wrapped it around her throat. 48. The plastic fork. 1994, 2024. After a picnic turned deadly in 1994, investigators collected discarded utensils. A plastic fork was preserved. 30 years later, DNA lifted from the fork's prongs revealed the killer hiding in the victim's circle of friends. 49. The curtain cord. 1979, 2024. A widow was murdered in her home in 1979, strangled with her own curtain cord. The cord was saved, but evidence testing failed. In 2024, touch DNA profiling extracted skin cells from the fibers. It named the neighbor who had often offered to fix her windows. 50. The crumpled receipt. 1986, 2024. A man was stabbed outside a convenience store in 1986. In his pocket, police found a receipt, oddly smeared. For decades, it was ignored. In 2024, DNA from the smudge identified the assailant, a petty thief who had gone unnoticed for nearly 40 years. 50 cases, 50 lives taken, silenced, and almost forgotten. For decades, families mourned in darkness, clinging only to hope. And for decades, the killers walked free, believing that time had buried their sins. But time did not bury them. Time preserved them. A single hair, a trace of sweat, a drop of blood, each one waited, silent, inside dusty boxes and forgotten shelves. Until science caught up. In 2024, DNA gave a voice to the voiceless, turning whispers of evidence into undeniable truth. Justice, though delayed, arrived, and it carried a chilling reminder. The past never truly disappears. Every secret leaves a trace. So tonight, as you put these stories to rest, remember, somewhere, in another evidence room, another forgotten fragment may still be waiting to speak. And these are just 50 cases. But out there in the shadows, hundreds more still wait. Unsolved, unanswered, unforgiven. If you want to uncover those stories with us, subscribe now and don't miss what comes next, because the truth is always closer than you think.